Okay, good evening. This is the work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen of November the 11th, 2025. We're going to start out by calling the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Here.
Alderman Blanton. Not here. Alderman Caesar.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Vice Mayor Potts.
Present.
Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor is present also. Next is citizen comments for items not on the agenda. I have no speaker cards for that. So we'll continue to move forward and go to the development activity report. And there's Catherine.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
So it's time again for your quarterly development activity report. This presentation, we're going to really break the data down into two parts. The first, we're going to go over the third quarter, so data from July 1st through September 30th of this year. But then we're also going to capture where we've been so far this calendar year. So we're going to do a year-to-date report as well, so that'll be from January through the end of September. And then I'll also go into our survey response update. This will be our second one, just to show the progress that staff has made following the development customer survey a year ago. So I'm just going to go ahead with the third quarter. If you follow along in your packets on page 4, there it is. In the third quarter of 2025, we issued 246 building permits. We issued 1,350 trade permits, so that's your plumbing, mechanical, and electrical. And we also issued 112 fire permits. I know I said this last time, but I would like to reiterate that the fire permits, we separated that out from the building permit back in late 2023. So that's why you see it kind of separated out now, when you don't have the full 5 years of data. But if you'll see with the building permit trends, this is usually the back half of the building and neighborhood services, like peak season, I would say. And so you'd see it's pretty on track with where we've been in the last 5 years. And when you look at permit and impact fees for the third quarter, permit fees, these are calculated based off the construction value of the project that's being permitted. And in the third quarter, we collected just under $500,000. With road impact fees and the other impact fees, these are actually based more on the type of development and the size of it. So with road impact fees, we collected $621,000 in the third quarter. Water impact fees, we only collected about $40,000. This is just by nature of the fact that we don't serve the entire community water. So it's just highly dependent upon where the development is happening. Sewer impact fees, we collected about $574,000, and with facilities tax, that totaled to about $237,000. With housing and construction costs, these are new dwelling units that we've permitted, so they're now going under construction. With single family, we permitted 48 new units. With townhomes, we've permitted 22 units, and in this quarter, we did not permit any multifamily buildings. And then how that relates to construction values, we always talk about this metric being seen as like the investment that's happening in the community. This is the value of the projects that are getting permitted. And so for residential projects in 3 months, we issued permits that totaled about $53 million. With non-residential, those permits totaled to about $67 million, and that totaled to about $121 million in the third quarter. Now we're going to shift to our year-to-date numbers. So this is all apples to apples. It's comparing 9 months to 9 months. When you look at building permits, so far in 2025, we've issued 823 building permits, 4,075 trade permits, and 320 of those fire permits. And when you look at these numbers, they're very consistent and stable with where we've been in the last 5 years, especially like post-pandemic. These really highlight a very healthy development pipeline where you're seeing projects that are going through our entitlement process and getting approved. They're actually making it to vertical construction. So it's a really good pipeline, a really good consistent pattern to see. And with permanent impact fees, year to date, we've collected $1.9 million of permitting fees. We're on track. We usually, I think, Building and Neighborhood Services collects about $2.5 million per year in permit fees. With road impact fees, it's about $4.3 million. Water impact fees are just under $1 million. Sewer impact fees are about $2.9 million, and facilities tax, it's almost $1.5 million. And when you look at impact fees over the last decade, it's always a fun chart to see because it kind of shows you that even though development activity has been very consistent, impact fees tend to be all over the place because they are highly dependent upon the type of development that's getting permitted. There's different uses and different sizes, and that all has a wildly different impact on what kind of money you're collecting on impact fees. I also do want to note that you see on the second line, that's your sewer impact fees, you do see a pretty significant increase in 2024 because that's the first year that the new water and sewer impact fee methodology was implemented. So that is why you see such a sharp increase in sewer impact fees. And then you have year-to-date construction value trends. So again, this is what you kind of see as your investment that's happening in the community. And this year, so far, the City of Franklin has permitted construction projects that have a total value of $649.3 million. This is almost exactly on track with where we were this time last year. So we are on pace to settle, to really have a strong year like we did in 2024.
Let me jump in on that a little bit. I think it is really noteworthy to think about 2 consecutive years where we will clear $800 million in permitted development, especially in the light of what you all have done in the last few years around increasing impact fees. Rightfully, there was some concern. Are we messing with things? How's that going to impact? Well, we have seen continued strong investment. And we'll continue to monitor it. It's still early on, and we made a pledge to you that we would keep an eye on that with making the changes we made. But this is very encouraging to see that kind of consistent investment. And when you look historically, we've had higher years, but we've never had consecutive years both clearing 800 million. So that's encouraging, but that's something we're keeping an eye on. But it's something I wanted to highlight for you. So thank you.
And next, just touching on housing trends. Again, this is still like comparing 9 months to 9 months. With single families, that's that dark blue shade. We've permitted about 204 single family units. With townhomes, that's that middle block. It's much more on the smaller side than we normally see. We've only permitted 30 townhomes this year, which is very odd, but we do have more projects coming online in the next couple of years that have a lot more townhomes. So we believe that this is just a unique circumstance. It's just kind of an interesting tidbit. But our last one was multifamily. We permitted about 211 units. That's all with one development out in West Haven. It's their active adult community that's now under construction. So that's where all of those multifamily units are from. And lastly, I want to touch on your quarterly update from the development survey. Again, this is just an update that we're providing once a quarter to kind of update you all on the internal efforts to address the recommendations that came from the customer survey about a year ago. Last update I gave you all, we talked about the concept of implementing kind of small customer satisfaction surveys at different points of the development process to really get more real-time feedback. And I'm happy to say that these surveys have been live now for about a month. We've had 10 responses so far, and every single rating was 5 stars. And I also really wanted to highlight, we had one comment that I thought was really cool to note, and the responder said, "I really appreciate the time that staff takes to answer calls or call back right away. Everyone is really helpful and patient with any questions I have. Please tell staff, great job." So I just thought that that might be a little fun thing to see. We've been really encouraging people to take the survey, and so we're seeing that kind of pay off. Next, these are 3 kind of other updates. I know last time I also told you guys about the development process focus group. This is an internal group that's really focused on that big recommendation that the consultant made about taking apart our processes and really analyzing them. Staff is continuing to discuss different process elements internally, and we have a goal to bring some of these new ideas to the Development Services Advisory Commission in the new year. I also want to note that the Development Services Advisory Commission had their last meeting of 2025 a week ago, and they are also talking about internally about topics that they would like to discuss in the next year. So that's really exciting too, to see what they have. And we also have the development maps. Staff is continuing to look at different ways that we can take our current development data and make it more transparent and user-friendly for the community. And since I met with you all a few months ago, staff has received preliminary feedback on the design concept and the vision from the Development Services Advisory Commission last week. We're going to continue working internally, but those development maps will be brought forward at a future joint conceptual workshop. So you will all get a chance to see that at a future date. And then lastly, I want to touch on the annual development report that the Planning and Sustainability Department provides, usually in the winter time. Staff is exploring ways to include additional data that just provides a more comprehensive picture of development in Franklin. And that's just something that's currently under review internally, but we wanted to provide that update to you all. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Alderman Baggett, then Alderman Berger.
This is great, thank you. I just wanted to make one note on the mini survey, and I know that seems like not very many responses, but how many were in the original survey? I think we had like 6
In the
in the original.
When we did that survey.
we sent out to about almost 500,
500 maybe
people, and we had
90,
66 responses.
All right, so if you extrapolate this 7 times throughout the year, and we do this on a continual basis, I think we're going to have, I think it's a great thing.
Yeah.
And in fact, we just did one of these in my business, and the response does seem low, but when you add it up over time and you get that continual feedback, I think it'll be helpful. So thank you, staff, for doing this. And I think it's going to reflect what we've seen, but we get it kind of on an ongoing basis, so thank you.
Alderman Berger.
Thanks. This is really helpful to have this. On page 5, it says permit and impact fees for third quarter. Do we know what the breakdown is on commercial versus residential on those impact fees?
So I don't have that on me, but we do
Yeah.
have that breakdown.
All right. I'd like to see that maybe on the report sometime, because it's just curious of how much of that's coming from residential and how much is coming from commercial.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
I can do
thanks.
that.
It's excellent. I like how the graphics are too. They're very, very readable. Thank you.
Alderman Caesar.
Appreciate the context here. I was interested mostly by the statement that you made that said that we have a healthy development pipeline and that projects that generally start complete. And as you look at the annual development program, what I would like to see, because I think we have in some instances a larger number than maybe is healthy of projects that have been entitled but haven't pulled permits and haven't completed yet,
Yep.
and want to manage that. I think this board has an appetite not just for rubber stamping. I don't want to speak for the board, for me. I should say I have an appetite not just for rubber stamping extensions, and I'm conscious of what we've kind of distributed and what's in the queue, and if there's a way that we can monitor starts to finishes, maybe that also gives us an important piece of information that the survey may not be capturing.
Yeah.
If there's something we could do better or differently to help support projects that we entitle coming out of the ground and going vertical, I would be very willing to participate in that.
Absolutely, and I do want to clarify, like, the entitlement process to construction, a lot of those are the projects that you guys have approved in the last several years are still, I'm not talking about some projects that may have been entitled years ago and maybe
Sure.
have not. Yeah.
I don't think you misspoke.
I just
think
wanna
your
make sure.
comment- No,
Yeah.
your comment spiked that in my mind. I'd like to see what we have, what we finish, and then if there's a moving ball there, that'd be great for us to see
Absolutely.
which way it goes.
Anybody else? Alderman Barnhill.
Yeah, she's got it
Can you go
entitled.
back 2 or 3
Tracker,
screens
yeah, yeah.
too, and show the road impact fees?
The road impact fees? Would you like the trends or just what?
That's close enough
All
right
right.
there. Whenever we look at these, when did we do the new road impact fee rates? Last year?
End of 23, wasn't it? Yeah.
They went into effect July 1st.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is the first quarter that we have the new rates.
Okay.
Oh, so the went in this.
You
this
decided
July
it.
1st?
Yeah.
You decided, but it got implemented July 1st.
So we did a grandfathering for 3 years. So anything that was sitting out there, they're not paying. Even if they came in this last quarter, they're paying the old rate, right?
So grandfathered projects, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, they are grandfathered under the old rates, but I do believe they pay a 5% increase.
There's an escalation.
An
built in
escalation
there.
rate.
Yes.
Yes.
And then you've got a phase in of the larger fees as well.
Right,
Over 5
but you
years.
got grandfathering and phasing in both.
Yeah.
So, I guess my question would be, what impact did that have on this if you had not had that in place? Do you know?
I do not know.
We'd have to look at
We would
that,
have to look at that.
Have to
And
look at
timing and collection, yeah.
Yeah.
And the nature of the projects, if they were entitled or when they were entitled,
Yeah.
all of that.
because when you look at this and it's the same, and that's great. I'm happy with the consistency of which we're doing and which we are had had the growth. There was the road impact fees were interesting. The water impact fees and sewer impact fees was also interesting, and the tremendous gap between the two. When you had $39,000 or something other in water and $500,000 in sewer, that's surprising a little bit. Does it look?
So, with are you talking about the difference between road impact fees and sewer?
No.
No,
I'm
water
talking
and
Just water and
talking
sewer.
about
Okay, so
different
with
fees.
water and sewer,
Yeah.
with water, just because we don't serve the whole city,
Right.
water, it's highly dependent on where the new development's happening. If it's not in our water district, we don't capture those impact fees. But with sewer, we do serve the whole community. So with every new development that comes online, we do collect sewer impact fees from them.
When you look at the way the districts lay out, more built out Franklin is in the Franklin
yes.
Water District. That's just the nature of it. You look at Mill Crofton, you look at Mallory Valley, you see those areas tend to align more with where we're seeing growth. So it's just, and of course sewer, sanitary sewer covers everything.
Exactly.
So it's just the difference of all of it collectively versus the differences among the water districts.
My other question or comment on this right here, when we had a meeting, I don't remember when, probably last month or something other than the question was asked, how many water customers do we have and how many sewer customers do we have? And there wasn't as great a difference in the two as what I expected them to be. I think the water was like 18,000 and sewer was maybe 23,000 or something other. There should be when you go looking at, when you take those numbers there, then you come back in and do water and sewer impact fees here. I haven't looked at it close enough to understand, but it just makes me wonder if why there's a difference or there's that greater difference. There should be a better correlation between what we're seeing and what we're getting here, because not 39. If it was $39,000 in water impact fees, that's at a quarter. That's not very much
No, it's not.
road impact fees for that. Even though I realize the Franklin water, where we're doing water, we're built out, and we're not collecting any and not paying any. But the question was the impact fees and the water and sewer fees. I'll look at that closely, and I may send you something to clarify
Absolutely.
a question or two that I have.
Alderman Berger?
But wouldn't some of that play, when we service outside our area? That would play into that as well, plus they're paying a higher rate. You know, if we're servicing sewer outside the city limits, outside our service area or city limits, then we charge them more, and I don't know how many customers we actually have outside. So that would probably play into a lot of that. I was thinking.
So your total numbers, just so it helped clarify, sewer is at 27,000, water is at 18,000. So it's 50% larger. And I think still it's true when you look at where we're seeing growth, where we have the expansion capability, it does align with other water districts more so than Franklin's, especially Mill Crofton, Mallory Valley. Those are the main ones that I think you see.
As a follow-up on that, we're not in the habit of doing a great deal of service outside the city.
No, it's limited.
Sewer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but there is some,
and they pay higher fees.
both water and sewer.
Okay, we'll keep moving along. We're gonna go to liquor license for BAM Franklin LLC. Any questions on that one? We'll go to number 3, which is liquor license to Franklin Bottle Shop. Any questions on that one? We do have a speaker card for that one if they want to make a comment. 1 minute.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Moore and Board. Ryan Mercurio, I'm here on behalf of the applicant entity, Franklin Bottle Shop LLC, here to answer any questions about the applicant and its owner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And item number 4 is a liquor license for Whiskey Wonderland. Any questions on that one? So we'll go to item number 5, which is revised addendum 2, City of Franklin contract number 2013-0041, Williamson County and Chartwell Hospitality for Conference Center operating agreement for Cool Springs Conference Center. We do have Michael Sanders here in case there's any questions for him. Is there any question about that? Okay, we'll go to, thank you.
This is a 5-year extension on to 2027, so take it to 2032.
32, yes.
Thank you.
Any questions for Michael? Okay, we'll keep going. Item 6 is ordinance 2025-25 is amended, an ordinance to amend as part of the annual update various chapters of Franklin zoning ordinance text, including overlay districts, signage uses, street lights, performance agreements, floodplain regulations, state law changes, and to amend the zoning map, including rezoning of 171 Hill Haven Lane and 370 Franklin Road to the Civic, Institutional District, and 171 Hill Haven Lane to Historic Preservation Overlay District. Good evening, Kelly.
Good evening. This ordinance is in the public process for the annual update. It's back on the work session tonight before the second reading and public hearing later tonight because there have been a number of amendments at the Planning Commission last month, and we'd like to take this time to walk through them with you and then have discussion. The first is the previously proposed addition of the 54-acre city-owned property into the HPO along Mac Hatcher near Franklin Road. And at first reading, BOMA removed that from the ordinance, and so that change to the ordinance triggered a review by the Planning Commission last month, and they recommended approval of the ordinance as amended. So the ordinance you'll see later tonight does have that property removed from the ordinance. The second is a plan amendment. At the September Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission passed an amendment to Envision Franklin to allow 3 stories with a 10-foot step back on the 3rd floor along the west side of Columbia Avenue for the HG Hill property. This means that the Columbia Avenue Overlay District Sub-Area 1 in the zoning ordinance should be amended so that the language reflects the new recommendation in Envision Franklin. So at the October Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission amended the ordinance so that the zoning text matches Envision Franklin. So this means that the ordinance that you'll see later tonight has that amendment in it to allow for 3 stories for the HG Hill property. Next is an amendment that regulates new vape shops in Franklin. Staff presented information at the October Joint Conceptual Workshop, and the Planning Commission recommended regulations for vape shops, which is included in the ordinance that you'll see later tonight. Joel is going to present the same research that staff presented to cover what vape shops are, the reasons that communities are moving to restrict them, and the proposed amendment to limit the locations of new vape shops. The fourth and last item for discussion tonight is, as part of the review of the ordinance, the Commission asked the Board if they would reconsider the proposed cumulative timeframe change in the floodplain, as they recognized that there wasn't a lot of time at the last meeting to discuss the floodplain issue, and they respectfully asked that staff be able to present the information provided to Planning Commission in August and the rationale for the staff recommendation to maintain the 5 years as the state plans to conduct an update of their state model ordinance within the next couple of years, and Shannon will present some information on that. So I will turn it over to Joel to talk about vape shops.
Thank you, Kelly. Good evening, Alderman.
I'm going to be discussing vape shops, as Kelly mentioned, kind of the research we've gathered and the discussions that we had at Joint Conceptual and with the amendments that were proposed. So the reason why we're bringing vape shops for you all today for discussion is because, as you may have heard, there has been a recent increase in number of vape shops that are opening not only in Franklin but in other communities around Tennessee as well as the U.S. These vape shops, with this recent increase that we've been seeing with them, they're opening up near sensitive locations. They're opening up near schools, residential neighborhoods, daycares, and we're starting to hear the concerns that are being raised by the public. In our discussions with other communities, their representatives, their residents are concerned about the negative influence vape shops have been having on adolescents groups and public health, but also the community character, the type of signage and lighting elements that these businesses use, and again, the impact that it's been having on their community character and aesthetic. And so staff learned that during our research that a lot of communities started moving to address this was because of a vape shop that had been opening up either in a sensitive location near a school or a residential neighborhood. And so with that, they moved to really evaluate what changes needed to be made. Right now in the zoning ordinance, vape shops are currently permitted anywhere where retail is permitted, and that's a number of zoning districts, like the downtown district for our historic square, as well as the neighborhood commercial zoning district. And so at the September 9th BOMA work session, this use was brought up, as you all may recall, to see if there was interest in studying this further, to see what other communities were doing, and to help clarify any questions that were asked. And then so the initial feedback was supportive to do that further research. And so staff presented our research at the October 23rd Joint Conceptual Workshop. And as Kelly said, Planning Commission at that time passed an amendment to address and regulate vape shops. And so I said previously, there were a number of questions that were brought up, and so we wanted to have some of these slides to address some of those questions. One of them being, of course, what is a vape shop? This was one question, of course, and we wanted to bring this forward to clarify any confusion with that. And so a vape shop is a specialty smoke shop that is a place that sells vaping, e-cigarette, nicotine, and cannabinoid products, accessory liquids, delivery devices to customers. These products can be found, as you all may know, they can be found at gas stations, convenience stores. They can be found in a standalone retail shop. Each shop is unique, but they are typically known for several things. They're known for offering a wide range of products, not just vaping and other accessory devices, but they're known for selling cannabinoid, THC, your other products like Delta 6, Delta 8, which is, those products that are below the legal limit for marijuana. They're known for their ease of access because, again, these products can be included in a convenience store or a gas station or a standalone retail shop. They can be opened up in a number of areas where retail is permitted. And although, again, you have to be 21 to purchase this, they still are easily accessible and influential to a lot of different adolescent groups. And then lastly, what they're really known, as you can see with this image here, they're known for their bright lighting and signage elements that they use to attract customers to make their business known. And so we had a few examples that were gathered to show kind of, again, how different they are, how unique they are, but again, the commonalities between them. You can see here a convenience market where you have a place where you can be purchasing soda, snacks, your lottery ticket, but then also any type of vape products you may need. Here's another example where one is in a neighborhood commercial shopping center. Notice the very extravagant, outgoing lighting and signage elements used to advertise this business, the lighting as well as the products that they offer. And then this one's from this is a retail shop in the Middle Tennessee community area where this business was renovated to accommodate this new standalone retail business. And you could see here, again, the colors, the lighting, the signage elements used to advertise their business. And so in doing our research, staff was kind of taken aback by the number of communities that have moved to address vape shops and to address these businesses opening up, as well as the communities that were already moving to move these regulations in front of their city council to have this larger discussion. You had communities like Goodlettsville, Murfreesboro, Lebanon, and Columbia, where they had already passed regulations to address vape shops. And then more recently, Hendersonville, where they were having the discussion with their city council to see how these proposed zoning ordinance regulations could address vape shops. And in our discussions with them, we made sure to always ask, what really started this process? Why did you move to regulate these businesses? And it was because, again, there was that concern that vape shops may be opening up. There's a number of them opening up, and they're opening up near sensitive locations. They were hearing concerns from residents about the impact on the schools where they were seeing them more frequently and youth exposure and the concern of public health, as well as, again, the over-clustering that they were seeing so many of them in a certain area. They were concerned on the community, its impact to the community character and aesthetic, making sure that this was going to be a business that aligned with their community vision. And so to address this, they enacted a number of different regulations to address this. They defined vape or specialty smoke shops to ensure that they were understanding what this new use was. They were prohibiting the use in the specific zoning districts. And they were also establishing buffer distances between new and existing shops and the sensitive locations like schools or daycares or other retail vape shops. And in some communities, they were also putting a specific cap based on the city population from the latest U.S. Census. And so the amendments that were brought forward at the Joint Conceptual Workshop and Planning Commission voted on was the amendment to first recommend defining vape shops. We wanted to have a comprehensive definition to understand what a vape shop was. And you can see here from this definition that is a store that A, receives at least 50% of its gross sales from, or B, devotes at least 25% of its floor area to the display, sale, distribution, delivery, and offering or marketing of these products. We wanted it to be a comprehensive definition because, as you all know, these products can be found in convenience stores. And so having this comprehensive definition based on other communities as well from how they've defined it, we believe that this definition could really help alleviate any kind of confusion and, again, have that interpretation as to what a vape shop would be when opening up. The other recommended amendment that was discussed by Planning Commission and was voted on was they regulate vape shops like adult-oriented businesses. We wanted to ensure that the standards for these vape shops were going to be clear in the zoning ordinance, and so the amendment that was recommended was only permitting vape shops in the heavy industrial zoning district. And then again, having the same standards like adult-oriented businesses, where a vape shop would not be permitted in any lot within 500 feet of a lot containing a civic and institutional use classification or a property zone CI. They would not be permitted within 500 feet of a lot containing a dwelling or a residential use, a daycare center, or another existing vape shop. We wanted to be clear in that in proposing these amendments to the Planning Commission as well as to you all that the recommended text amendment is going to be something that only impacts the new retail vape shops. These are not going to be impacting the currently existing vape shops in Franklin. Those would be grandfathered in and could continue to operate. Or if they were discontinued for 30 months, then of course they would have to comply with the new ordinance regulations that would be discussed and passed today. And then of course I know the question is, of course, how many do we have operating in Franklin today? Staff did do research. We did drive around to see how many were existing in Franklin, and we did find around 11 locations of vape shops that are currently operating in Franklin today. Some of them around the downtown area, as well as near I-65, where you can see them near the Murfreesboro Road, as well as over there in Cool Springs, where you see them on Mallory Lane, where other retail is existing today. So in our research that we presented, we wanted to make sure we were comprehensive in addressing any of the questions that we would be receiving, as well as what other communities had gone through in their process. And so we wanted to make sure that that was presented today, not only for the discussions that are questions that you may have, but ensuring that we addressed what was going on with retail vape shops. And so we will continue to monitor the developments that are happening at the state level as that process is still going, as they discuss what legislation they will be passing. But that was what we had presented at Planning Commission and the amendments that were recommended for retail vape shops. Thank you.
It's a tag team operation. Love it.
Good evening.
Can we ask questions on the previous one?
Sure, absolutely.
Shanna, sorry. I've got questions for you too.
Okay.
You'll get your turn.
So, existing vape shops, I know we have a new CO process. You said you had to drive around to find these. So I'm curious how our new regulations would impact those that might be operating without a CO now? And would this allow any kind of regulation or, and you don't have to get specific, but just more broadly speaking, if they don't have an active CO for that use for the property, and we pass
That actually
this.
might be Shannon.
Shanna, I was just kidding.
You did have questions.
I did.
So if they don't have a CO currently, then they have not been legally established.
Okay.
So they do not have
So this would
non-conforming
apply.
status.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Alderman Barnhill.
how many of these would then exist under the new regulations? If they were not there now, how many of them would be able to get a permit?
That's a good question. So if you're asking, so I can understand.
But you're putting it in heavy industrial.
Yeah.
Okay. None of that is heavy industrial. So how many would be permitted under the new regulations?
So maybe I can show this via a map. So we did create a map so that you all could kind of visualize the area that we're talking about, and to see, how many could open up in this area. So you can see here the 11 that are existing, our city limits here.
Right.
And then if I turn on the heavy industrial zoning layer, you can see kind of where that would all really be concentrated at. And so they would really be concentrated in this area. This is kind of where most of our heavy industrial is located, kind of in the southern portion of Franklin. So they
Right.
would,
Along
able to open
Downs. Most of that.
yeah.
Alderman Bland.
Yeah, I'm all right.
It's interesting when this was first brought up about, I don't know, a month or so ago. I drew the comparison that most of what you find in these stores, you can find in a convenience store. Now that's a part of the narrative, which I appreciate you recognizing that. I don't necessarily have a problem with us addressing this, but I think that there's some things that I wrote down that I found interesting. We already regulate signage. So the idea that the signage is a stumbling block to me is a little bit of a moot point because we already addressed that. You say no? Okay, I'm getting eye rolls and no. But I mean, we go so far as to tell restaurants they can't have a neon in their window at the factory. So when you tell me that's an issue, but yet it would be you don't allow it there, but you're saying that bright lights and whatever that entices people, I'm looking at you because you presented, I apologize,
That's okay.
is going to be one of the stumbling blocks. I would say I don't necessarily agree with that. The other thing is you gave us examples of these shops in other cities, but yet you're saying we have 11 here. It would stand to reason we need to see what we're already looking at in our own town, not other towns, as far as what are we dealing with that's already here. So and I know we don't want to out any existing businesses, but if it's something we're trying to regulate, we need to look at what's already here. So to me, I think that's a very valid point. Lastly, when you talk about geography and where it shouldn't be, next to a liquor store, to me makes no sense because liquor stores are very highly regulated as it is. And they already are not able to be within distance of some of the places that you don't want these to be. Lastly, again, I'm not going to sit here and argue that we don't need to take a look at this, but I think that it's almost, it's not comprehensive enough for me to support it in its current fashion. I also know that there are a lot of people that use products for different reasons than just getting high. So, I mean, there's people who use it for joints. There's people who use it under cancer treatment, different variations of this. So, jumping on the bandwagon of a long list of Middle Tennessee cities makes sense to me that it's something that's at the front burner. So I understand going down the road to look at it, but I don't think there's some pieces that are missing for me that are specific to us.
Vice Mayor.
Thanks, sir. I do have a couple of questions, and I hear what Alderman Blanton's saying, especially on the signage and the lighting and things like that. I know that I asked these questions when it was first presented because there is a vape shop of Question that has 6, I'm going to call them neon signs or backlit signs on the front. And the understanding right now is they can have those as long as they're not within 12 inches of their exterior window. They can have as many as they want on the interior. And so that's something that I've asked to be reviewed right now. But I hear what you're saying as far as the signs. I did have a question, and I also like what Alderman Blanton said about the locations versus the liquor stores and how that's regulated. I did have a question. It didn't surface when it was first presented. How do we get to the 25%? You spoke to this in your initial presentation. 25% of its floor area, because a lot of these vary in size. They also vary in the number of products that they're carrying. So how did y'all land at that number?
That came from our discussions with our other peer communities. We looked at a lot of the square footage, as you said, they're unique in some of their sizes in some of these retail shops. And so they, like us, they also reviewed how some of these square footages will look like, how one business could really make it, a little bit more confusing if it was 49%. And they were saying that, well, we're not a vape shop. We're this kind of shop. We're this kind of use. Even though the signage, the products that their displays and everything, even though the square footage of the total area was 49%, they didn't meet the 50. It's still pretty clear that from their signage, they really are getting most of their sales and are mainly operating like a vape shop. And so from the other communities that we talked with, 25% captured a lot of what this business was ultimately going to be. That's what we got.
Were there any communities that used a lower percentage of the floor area?
No, it was pretty consistent between 25% or 50%. That's what a lot of people that we spoke with favored the lower one because, again, it just eliminated that confusion of going in there and inspecting the property and seeing, or when they submitted building plans and they showed their square footage, a lower percentage just helped eliminate that confusion. So that's kind of what we heard.
And for clarification, that 25%, that covers any ingestible smoking type product or the accessory products, everything that was in your previous list.
Yes, Alderman,
is part of that 25%.
Yes, Alderman, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Alderman Berger.
So these stores can carry cannabis for medicinal purposes? Medicinal. I get it. It's been a long day. Medicinal.
They can carry, so there's a wide range of products they can sell. And this was a question that was brought up as well because this retail environment is very new, and this is one of the things that is still actively being discussed and understood. There's a lot of federal requirements, FDA requirements, but they can sell CBD products, THC products, and that's where you commonly hear like Kradium. That's where you hear Delta 6, Delta 8. Those are the products that are underneath the legal requirement of what would be classified as an illicit substance. And I can't speak to the science or what it is, but they do offer these. You do see signs for them.
And do we know of any legislation that's being proposed now? Have we read any, or have we been privy to it? Have we actually read it and know?
Yeah, so the TABC, starting January 1, will take over regulation of all of this. And hemp-related products will have to be, anybody that's selling at retail or wholesale will have to get permits. So it's going to be a whole new permitting scheme starting January 1.
Which we'll have to comply to. And then the other thing, let's see.
THC less than 0.3.
So that's that stuff that
The zoning, you brought that up too about where we are and located in the zoning. Brandy brought that up. It makes sense that we restrict liquor stores within so many feet. And I think that would go along with it. I would think that we'd have that already in order. And the signage thing, I don't understand that either because we already have, like Brandy brought up, that we already have ordinances for our signages. But also the color and intensity of lighting But the other thing I was interested in is not having so many of these in one area. I think you were saying about limiting the clustering. I would definitely want to see that happen. I think clustering is not a good idea, and a couple other things. Well, a lot to be said here, but you know, I think we do need some restrictions.
Alderman Caesar.
I would agree with Alderman Berger. The clustering is probably a concern. However, if we limit it to the industrial area, we won't be able to avoid clustering because it is such a small portion of our community. So we probably need to think through that. The other thing that, just at your cursory review, I think you said what there were 12 on there, 11. And I'm not a vapor, but I can look at that map and there's at least 3 that I know. One is on Downs, one is at 96 on the other side. That would fall under this, that may not be currently considered vape shops, but they sell cannabis type products. I'm not an expert either in that, but it would apply to those buildings as well. So we're probably talking about more than 11 businesses. We're probably talking about 13, 14, maybe 15 different businesses that are allowed to continue operating because we would grandfather those in. But we may want to be conscious about how restrictive we are, especially with new legislation. And Sean, if I heard you correctly, it will go into effect in January. But do we have additional guidance in that legislation that we need to consider? How do we land these two ships?
So all that really happened was the state said TABC would start regulating it. They have drafted rules, but they have not yet been approved, and they have to go through their board, and there's a process. They're not in effect yet, but in draft form, it looks like every single person who will sell it. So that means every employee would have to get a permit. And in particular, it has the same kind of rules like you would think of with a liquor permit. You can't sell to people under 21. They have to be, anything that you're selling has to be, it says, behind the counter, which will be interesting to see how you can, how they're going to really do that. And then it can be and should be available for testing by the TABC at any time.
Okay. And in that legislation, there's nothing that restricts where it can be sold. So
no, they leave that up to the jurisdiction. Same thing with alcohol, with liquor stores and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Alderman Baggett.
Is there anything, so one of these signs that he mentioned of speaks of Delta 8, and that you're saying that's not going to be allowed. I guess you
No.
brought that up.
Threshold.
Yeah, Delta 8 is allowed, Delta 9 and Delta 10, but then THC can be sold if it's less than 0.3%. So, I mean, that's going to have to be regulated by the THC and how they do that.
Okay. The other thing I would just tell you is that you're going to be able to get a vape at a gas station. So, like, all the concern, so, I mean, I don't know that we really need to overthink this. It's really these standalone, ugly signs in residential areas, which they have popped up in, like, we don't want them there. And that's okay. But guess what? If you want a vape, you can go to the Circle K and still get whatever you want to get. And if you want to, if there's something else that's special that the state, whatever's coming up with, they want or don't want to have, that can be in the heavy industrial. I mean, that's what we're doing. And you're not going to have clustering problems because we don't have clustering of adult entertainment venues in Franklin, and we regulate it the very exact same way. So I don't know. I think these are all obviously good things, but I think we need to do this. They're popping up. I saw one on Moore's Lane, most conspicuous place, and it's like this big 8-ball, is the sign, and you're like, we don't want this it doesn't need to be everywhere in Franklin. I think we're really splitting hairs here. People are going to still be able to get what they need that's legal, and we can regulate this in the appropriate place, just like we have done adult entertainment and other things, and let's move on. That's my 2 cents.
Alderman Baggett, where is the adult
That's what I wanted
store?
to know too.
I haven't seen that.
You missed the first parts of the slides where we talked about we regulate various things.
I mean,
right?
the location of it. Where's the location? Yeah. I mean, I drive around Franklin and I don't see it.
Why don't we have it?
Oh,
Why don't we have it?
Why don't we have it?
Because we regulate.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, we've already got these existing. They can continue operating. They have a CO. And people can still get their vapes at the gas stations. We just don't want 100% or 25% or more established with the signage and the standalone. I mean, there's one on West Main Street.
Nobody's arguing there, okay? I don't think they
And
are.
the one on West Main Street has brought about a number of police calls, and I've been involved with it. So I'm passionate about this because, frankly, on that West Main Street one is infiltrated that area, and the residents were very upset about it, and we don't need them there.
I was going to make a quick comment that I don't care for the signs. I think they're designed strictly to attract youth, underage folks to go in those shops. I mean, if you look at these, all of them are very suggestive to entice youth. And I'm glad to hear the TABC is going to working on it. But I have great concern on some of the products that are not regulated at this point that are being sold in those shops. So go to it, TABC. Item 7 is Resolution 2025.
We still have the discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to help you. Get you home
Shannon's
early.
getting up here one way or another.
One way or another. So we'll continue with everybody's next favorite topic, floodplain. So just to recap, in August, Planning Commission voted to remove the proposed amendment to change from the 5 years and keep it at 1 year, or voted to keep it at 5 years and not change it to the 1 year. At the first BOMA reading in September, it was voted to bring it back in to the update and amend it to change it to the 1 year cumulative rather than the 5. At the October Joint Conceptual Workshop, there was conversation with some of the aldermen that were present and the Planning Commission that at the BOMA work session when we presented and then went to voting, that it didn't have much discussion because time was really pressed, and so requested that I present again. So now you're going to get to see the full presentation and do with that, what you will. So this came about as request from an alderman to help us address routine maintenance in the floodplain, such as roofing, painting, and so forth. We had extensive conversations with FEMA and the state, and were told that we could not create exemptions or we would be creating a violation. So staff really tried to put our heads together and come up with a solution, and the only thing we could come up with was to change from the 5-year cumulative to 1 year. So what are substantial damage and improvement? Substantial damage and improvement is triggered when there's improvements and or damage, they run together, meets or exceeds 50% of the structure's value. It does not include land value, only the structure's value. That can be obtained from 2 ways, either from the county property assessor plus 15% or through an independent appraisal. But again, it's strictly based on the structure's value. If those improvements and or damage hit the 50% mark, then the entire structure is required to be brought into compliance with current floodplain development standards. For residential, that means the structure has to be elevated to a minimum of 3 foot above base flood elevation. For non-residential, that means it has to be flood-proofed to a minimum of 1 foot above base flood elevation. The overall goal for the substantial improvement and substantial damage requirements is to gain compliance and have safer and more sustainable buildings. Why is it important? We're promoting safer structures by reducing injury, loss of life, and property damage, reducing future flood risk by preventing repeat losses, controlling long-term costs by saving money over time for the property owners and the public, ensuring fair, consistent enforcement with equal treatment across properties, maintaining NFIP participation for access to flood insurance and aid, and encouraging resilient rebuilding with stronger structures after disasters. The recommendation. Substantial damage and improvement rules are crucial to gaining compliance and having safer structures in the floodplain. It is important to note that the city did previously have a 10-year cumulative time frame that was reduced to 5 years in 2020. Further reducing the time frame doesn't seem to be best practice. The CRS rating, community rating system, it won't change regardless of whether we move it to the 1 year cumulative or keep it at the 5. We will lose points, but it will not be enough to change our ranking. The state is looking to update the model ordinance within the next 2 years. They have indicated that they will be looking at making the state's model ordinance be 5-year cumulative. So staff's recommendation would be to keep it at the 5-year cumulative until we see exactly what the state is going to do.
Questions?
Question.
Alderman Peterson.
I do think that we should keep it at the 5-year. Because that's what, it looks like that's what the state is going to do, but it is what it does now. And so I don't see any point in putting it to 1 year.
Alderman Caesar.
Perhaps I'm the only one with this question, but I am confused at what 5-year, 1 year. Can you pretend like I'm an 8th grader and talk to me like that?
Sure.
Because
So,
hopefully I'm the only one. And if so, we can go and have a conversation, but maybe I'm not.
okay, so
You hope so, not.
Yeah.
let's just use an example that you have a home and you want to do a renovation to it. You're doing a renovation that's at 30% of the structure's value. With it being a 5-year cumulative, if during the next 5 years, from the date the permit is issued, you have another flood, you have a fire, you decide you want to remodel again, if you get to that 50% mark during that 5-year period, that's when it would be triggered. Does that?
So if I do another 21% of the
Yes.
value, and not to get too deep in the weeds here, but we've had some pretty healthy appreciation of properties over 5 years here in Franklin. Is the 5-year valuation, is that cumulative as well?
Because it would be based off of what the value was at the time of the first permit. At the end of that 5-year period, then a new market value could be assessed.
And the 1 year allows you to reset then every
Correct,
year.
yeah, so you could do a 30% or a 49% and then do a 49%
You
12
could
months
do-
later. Or
you
12
could
months,
do-
1 day
Yeah.
later.
You could do 49% every year.
Shanna touched on this, but I think the 1 year is a workaround to provide for kind of ongoing maintenance type things, a new roof, a new HVAC system, stuff people have to do and not have it count against you. That's the only thing we could find. We tried to see if there's a carve out for just normal maintenance type work. There is not. And so we sort of had a charge to find a way to allow for that. And that was really the only path we could find. It does put us in this conflict with some other practices and how the rating system scores it. It's not an easy one because they're both valuable goals, and we're trying to. There's not a way to do both.
I think it should be stated, and you've said it, that the reason this is in place isn't to penalize homeowners or landowners or property owners.
No.
It's to protect
Correct.
right, them and first responders if we have a flood event that demands folks go out and try to rescue and protect loss of property and hopefully protect loss of life. So I appreciate the workaround, but I'm not deaf to the fact that by making this workaround, we could find ourselves dealing with a pretty serious situation because of this at some point in the future.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Alderman Baggett.
I was going to wait because I have something, to say on this. But that would be true if at least one property had been improved and met the stated wonderful, noble goals on those slides. Not one property, because of this rule, has become, just because of this cumulative rule. How many properties have been raised because of this rule? Last time you said 0.
For this particular
rule that we're talking about.
Yes.
Not one single house has been raised and improved, or not one house has been because of this rule. Because of this rule, Alderman Peterson. Because of this rule, that was not a substantial improvement.
The house you're referring to, Alderman Peterson, triggered substantial improvement and substantial damage because they had a fire. And then proceeded to do work on the house without talking to us first, and because they decided it was a good time to renovate since they were fixing from a fire, and so that triggered that one.
Now, and that's a good point, because this does not preclude in situations where something like that does happen, and the structure is substantially damaged. There's a difference between substantially damaged and substantial improvement.
But they
have the same effect.
Yes.
At the if it's substantially damaged, yes, they're going to be raised. Improvement. Now, you had a picture of the building on Bridge Street that is a repeated flood. And now think about Fifth Avenue. This is the other stretch of buildings. These buildings have been stuck like this for a number of reasons. Now, one of them isn't, because they went through a process to get historically exempted, but the rest of them, because if they spend more than 50% of the value of the structure on simply doing something like replacing the roof, or putting a coat of paint on the wall, or refinishing a hardwood floor in there, if all of that adds up to, the improvement to that building adds up to 50%, they have to raise that at least, 10 plus feet? And they're not going to do it. And so, and no tenant wants to occupy it because they can't afford to risk having to spend the amount of money. They're stuck. So this is going to allow some of those properties and other properties that I think are of interest for that to reset every day, or every year, not every day. Now, here's where, when I talk to the folks in the neighborhoods, and here's what they do. They don't report them. They don't report the substantial improvement. So not only do we have a rule that hasn't actually resulted in a safer house, although the intent is there, and I understand like these goals and why we're doing this, I get it, but it's actually not doing it. Or else we would have had some properties over the last 20 years that have been raised because of this. And so what you're having is, because in Ewingville, for an 1,800 square foot house, it's $450,000 to raise it. People are not wanting to follow the rules and submit for floodplain permits because it's adding to the 50%, and they might get caught and have a $450,000. And if you're thinking about the home raising project, we're talking about regular improvements to your house. They're not doing it. People are not turning these in. So you have an ineffective rule that hasn't ever delivered anything. And maybe if we did 1 year, people would start doing it. And we could actually, and I said this from the start, it's not just this, we need to add to it additional teeth, and I know we're looking into that. But with the 1 year should also come some additional items, like if you replace your HVAC, it needs to be raised. Now, all the folks don't all agree with that that I've heard about on this, from the commercial or the residential. But I think we should, and then we actually might get some improved.
And I completely understand where you're going with that, Alderman Baggett, but I think with particularly what you were just alluding to, there could be some unintended consequences
For
with
what?
that. Say, someone's replacing their HVAC and we tell them, okay, you've got to make it compliant now. If it's a slab on grade, don't know how you're going to make that compliant. Because if the ductwork is underneath the house and it has to be meeting the freeboard requirement, they're going to have to move it overhead, and then that's an increased cost.
The ductwork would be, but I'm talking about the units, because
The
we have the
units would have to be
that are raised,
elevated, and then the ductwork have to be elevated.
I'm
So
just,
I'm
I hear
afraid
what
there
you're saying.
could be unintended consequences.
Well, respectfully, there's unintended consequences
True.
with this too, which is A, nothing's getting improved because of this rule. Nothing is getting more flood-proof because of this rule. I mean, I'm beginning to think that's intended. Like, we actually, and two, FEMA, the rules, the National Floodplain, the code has 1 year. And it's to say it's not best practices, we're always pointing towards the state and the FEMA or the NFIP floodplain ordinance, except for now, because it says 1 year in the NFIP, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. We're always pointing to, well, NFIP says this and we can't do that. Well, except in this case, for the 6th meeting in a row, this is what got me a little bit going. We have talked about this for 6 meetings. So I'm sorry, Planning Commission, if you missed it, but we have talked, and thank you for the recommendation in your motion. But we've talked about this February 25th, April 2025, 8/28, 9/9, 9/23, and it's come back to us. If you're wondering why we're seeing this again, I'm not. That's just where I'm going to stop. But I think we should do the 1 year. You said it 2 weeks ago. You said it on September the 23rd, and you said it on September 9th, but Planning Commission got to see it again. Why don't we get redos? Why don't we get redos when something doesn't happen that we don't like? Why don't we get redos? That's what this is. This is a redo and a redo because maybe some staff, maybe some people on Planning Commission, it's a waste of time at this point. We've seen it 6 different times. Anyway, thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Peterson.
Discussed at the, I think the last planning commission meeting, and there was talk, and they were talking about what they're doing in Nashville and everything, and so, but the other thing is, it says the state of Tennessee is looking to update the state's model ordinance, and it will be updated in the next 2 years, and it says the new state model will be 5-year cumulative.
May I respond to that? If it were up to the state of Tennessee floodplain managers, can I have the?
Can we turn, Angie?
I'm sorry.
Make sure you guys see that. If it was up to the Tennessee state floodplain managers, every single structure in our floodplain would not exist. They would be gone, and there would be this is what's happening. That is what these rules, and I've talked to the folks about it. They do not want structures in floodplains.
Well, of course not.
Of course not. Who would, right? But there are structures, Alderman Peterson.
Tell
There
me.
are commercial structures on Fifth Avenue. They would want this entire thing to be an open park. But you've got property owners that own those buildings on Fifth Avenue. You got property owners that own houses in Ewingville. You got property owners that own houses in Lancaster. And I think it's our job as representatives to advocate for them. And especially this commercial stuff on Fifth Avenue and in this whole area, people are tired of seeing it blighted. And yes, it can happen, but you got to raise it up and you got to do all this stuff. You can't even get a tenant in there, because if you do, you're going to have to pay $1 million to raise the thing 20 feet, and it's going to look an eyesore. And it's not 20 feet. I'm exaggerating in that part. All this is, and I'm frustrated because we're having the same conversation again. Because we did something. Now it's funny, and then I really am going to stop. But it's funny, when Planning Commission changed their mind on Envision Franklin at the last minute, did it come back to us for us to tell them what they should have done after they changed it? And that's their document. But here we are. We passed something and voted on something. Staff said, and I will follow the lead. Well, Planning Commission has to go see it again. so that they can tell us one more time that we shouldn't do this, and then ask you to present for the 6th time. I'm getting fired up, and so I'm stopping. But I would love to hear what everyone else says. I have tons of residents who believe in this, tons of business owners on that stretch right there, there would be tenants in those buildings if this rule was in force. And guess what? If it doesn't change, I guarantee you we're not going to have anybody else raise their house or raise their commercial property because you leave it at 5.
Ready to move on? Item 7, Resolution 2025-91, a resolution to initiate a study at the request of the property owner for a plan of services for potential future annexation of 79.89 acres for property located south Hillview Lane, west of Columbia Pike. Established a public hearing December the 9th, 2025. Joey?
Just give me 1 second while it pulls up.
It's almost there.
All right, thank you. So the property being considered is located south of Hillview Lane and west of Columbia Pike and measures approximately 80 acres in size. It's kind of the Tetris looking piece on that map right there. It is contiguous to the city limits. It is currently been labeled as Development Reserve Design Concept and Envision Franklin, mainly because of the lack of infrastructure and that there's essentially no road network to this particular parcel. The owner of the property has indicated that there are no plans to further develop this property. So any future plan that is more than 2 houses would have to come back to the Planning Commission for a Envision Franklin plan amendment to something that would support more density or more development on that property. The property is within the SW1 basin as defined by our sanitary sewer basin study, and is defined as a long-term annexation capability area. This is next to and connecting to the Harlan PUD property, but the applicant has indicated this is not going to be a part of the Harlan development. Should it ever be in the future, either a whole new plan for the Harlan PUD would have to come back through for a formal review or a formal revision. The property owner does already own quite a bit of property that's contiguous to this parcel, so he just wants to bring it all into the city and have it within the city limits. So with that, staff recommends approval of Resolution 2025-91. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I do have Rob Dodson that wants to make a comment. You got a couple of minutes, Mr. Dodson?
I signed up to speak, Rob Dodson. I signed up to speak, Mayor, because out of an abundance of caution, I noticed that this was contiguous with the Harlan project, and the timing of this seemed rather unusual since Mr. Ingram has owned this property for over a decade and suddenly has decided he wants to pay city taxes on a piece of property that is unserviceable by any city services and no plan to get any city services on the property, but wants to be annexed. So I felt like it looked like there's something afoot here. I don't know that there is. Mr. Gamble has assured me that it isn't, even though Boyle's name is on the paperwork, the annexation documents that are submitted, which also piqued my curiosity. And, you know, it all kind of just had a smell to me, and I just wanted to bring those matters to your attention before this annexation of a completely rural piece of property that's not asking for any city services, but only to pay city taxes, gets annexed into the city. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Item number 8, Resolution 2025-84, approving a revised development plan for West Franklin Park PUD subdivision with 1 modification of development standard parking for the property located north of McEwen Drive, east of Interstate 65 and 6100, 6700 Tower Circle. Established public hearing December 9th.
Thank you. This one should hopefully be pretty straightforward. This is a revision to the West Franklin Park PUD subdivision. It's mainly just for one MOS. There are no changes or proposed changes to the entitlements of either the residential or the non-residential space that's already been approved. This is to bring or revise the parking standards to current standards. The project was vested under previous ordinance with a little bit higher parking standards, so the applicant has come in to request modification of standards to apply our current parking standards to this project while leaving the rest of it vested under its previous ordinance. We're supportive because they're still our parking standards, so we've already reviewed them and we're comfortable with them. So we are recommending approval for both the MOS as well as the development plan revision overall, and it was recommended by Planning Commission.
Any questions, comments?
We changed the standards and they would fit our new.
Alderman Berger.
Structures, I can't remember. Aren't they parking structures?
Yes, they are parking structures
Okay.
and they are entirely wrapped.
Good, okay.
Item 9 is City of Franklin contract number 2025-0164, an interlocal agreement between Williamson County, Tennessee, City of Franklin, Tennessee, established the terms and financial responsibilities for the provision of firefighting and emergency response services located outside of the city's boundary and within the surrounding unincorporated area. Chief?
Okay, so basically this is an auto aid agreement with Williamson County to provide services on the I-65 corridor down to 840, both in the north and the southbound lanes.
And you're going to stay there for number 10, which is City of Franklin contract 2025-0216 with KFT Fire Trainer for provision of recommended repairs to the burn building.
Yes, sir. These are much needed repairs, upgrades that we need for our existing burn building. Our burn building was constructed around 2004, so we're about 21 years into it and do some much needed upgrades in order to continue the level of training that men and women of the department are used to.
This is definitely good for your training.
Yes, ma'am. And we also get credit through ISO, which helps on our ISO rating as well.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Item 11 is partnership opportunity with Tennessee Department of Transportation for the intersection improvements with Mack Hatcher Parkway and Royal Oaks Boulevard.
As Paul's coming up, this is an opportunity that actually just came our way in the last week, so we were able to get this on this agenda and want to share this with you. It is an opportunity for spot improvement at the Royal Oaks Mack Hatcher intersection. It would be a partnership with the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and we believe there's a pretty aggressive timeline to complete it. I'll let Paul kind of walk you through that, and there's steps we want to take to move that forward and would bring back to you some more specific agreements down the line. So Paul, take it away.
So recently, as about 2-3 weeks ago, the Region 3 director for TDOT approached us and asked if we wanted to do a temporary solution at this intersection, essentially to try to buy us more time and add a little bit of capacity to it. The exact extents of what we're going to do on Mack Hatcher aren't fully known, but essentially what we would do is widen to get at least 2 more southbound lanes and potentially widen to get 2 northbound lanes across the bridge. So we're still working on those details with them. They said that TDOT has a resurfacing project coming up, and they would essentially fold their piece into it. What they're asking us to fund would be any side street improvements, which would be on Royal Oaks Court and South Royal Oaks. And so what we're initially proposing on South Royal Oaks is to do a westbound double left turn lane to southbound, and then on Royal Oaks Court, we would add 2 right turn lanes. We estimate the design can be covered within our annual operating budget, and then we'd have to work with the CIP to fund the actual construction of it. The construction's estimated to be about $700,000 is where we're at now. We do know there'll probably be some right-of-way acquisition required on the YMCA based on the right-of-way that's there today. But we would recommend moving this forward and wanted to see if there's any questions.
And there also, as you remember, you just approved the updated capital investment program. So there's capacity within that could help us with this, as well as there are a couple projects that we'll be bringing back to you with some specific options that may also free up some capacity as well. So we we also just within our budget believe we've got capacity to accommodate this. As you look at this in the southeast widening, which is in the 10-year TDOT plan, our understanding is the improvements we'd be making on Royal Oaks would stay with that widening. Those would last. We're not so sure that the state improvements on TDOT would be so much, that their funding on Mac Hatcher would be so much that case, but at least the investment we're making would last beyond and roll right into the improvements of the widening of Southeast Mac Hatcher.
This improvement will certainly help in the AM and the PM. You're still going to be stuck with capacity issues at Lewisburg, but this can certainly help us in the AM peak hour, the improvements that are being proposed.
Alderman Brown.
Just curious, I mean, thrilled that they want to do something, but just curious why this one and not Lewisburg or not another intersection along that stretch of.
I think that's a TDOT question. They came to us.
I mean, was there like a random pull of an intersection? I mean,
and they're going to work with us to make an improvement. We're going to say,
I'm not looking the gift horse in the mouth.
Yes.
I'm just saying, I'm just curious if they gave a reason why this one and not another one, but curious.
We've probably nagged at them a pretty good bit about
Okay, well, that's fine. That's fine.
Vice Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is extremely exciting. And Paul, I also wanted just to get follow-up. And we can see, and I hope everybody at home can see the additional turn lanes that you were talking about. 2 additional going westbound, then turning south. And then, as you say, coming out of the court there by the Y and Dr. Kemp's office, adding those additional lanes. Could you also mention what's on the next slide, which is the additional lane where TDOT is going to take us from the intersection a little bit further south?
Yeah, so south on Mac Hatcher, essentially, they've not allowed this in the past because of the rock fall zone, but for whatever reason, they're now allowing us to build these extra lanes near the rock bluff, but it will go almost nearly to the bridge there. And we are going to look, I guess, when they do the resurfacing, to try to make some improvements at Lewisburg where there's that heavy movement of going onto Lewisburg Pike, making that left turn lane. And so we're going to attempt to extend those turn lanes as far back as possible to allow more vehicles to queue.
And that's actually where I was going with this, is similar as we've seen at Mac Hatcher and Donaldson Creek, how we found through engineering that there was enough width to restripe and widen and add a turn lane. If we can continue to do that and see how much further we can stretch those turn lanes out and restripe them so people can really see that. But I'll tell you what, this is very exciting. I know this particular stretch right here, residents coming from the south area, say between Lewisburg and getting up to Highway 96, on average can take anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes sometimes at peaks. And the fact that we're making these improvements right now is going to be substantial.
Alderman Berger.
So I'm a little confused here. A long time ago, they told us, we asked about this, remember that? And then we were sort of told no. Using the shoulder and putting more capacity there, and now it's okay. But they're not touching the rock wall.
They're not proposing to touch the rock wall at this time.
So they're going to do this, and then they're going to come up and blow it all up again to put in the new road at some point.
2032 is when it's scheduled for construction.
Yeah.
So it's a ways off, so we'll definitely, and our improvements, like Eric said, are permanent.
Yeah. Or what?
The side street improvements that we're
Yeah,
funding.
I'm not debating that we don't need this now. We certainly do, but it's funny that they wouldn't do it before, but now they want to do that. As far as the shoulder, they're going to use that and bring that into compliance, obviously, for a lane.
We've been asking for over 10 years to do
I know, but it was a no, and it was something to do with the wall, so I just didn't know. Okay, so you said, are we going to the bridge or past the bridge?
Just to the bridge.
Just to the bridge?
Is what this
And then it narrows.
interimly shows. So what we're going to do is a traffic analysis, look at what we can do with some of the pavement markings, and then work with TDOT, and we can certainly bring that back to share with y'all.
Okay.
And I do believe we can do this pretty fast. The biggest holdup that we're going to have is right-of-way acquisition on Royal Oaks Court, but we may be able to do our part separately on South Royal Oaks and then follow up with Royal Oaks Court.
Well, there's
Just to
additional
expedite
lanes
it.
on Royal Oaks. is really, North Royal Oaks, coming up to, there's really needed. Okay, thanks.
Alderman Brown, you had another comment?
Does this delay our Franklin Road and
No,
Hillsborough?
we're working right now. No.
Okay. No.
Yeah, different consultants are going to work on it, and they've already agreed to a very, very quick turnaround time.
So really what we want is just to make sure you're informed.
Yeah.
We think we have enough capacity within existing budgets to do some additional design and survey work to keep this moving. I would expect we come to you with an interlocal agreement of some sort or some agreement with TDOT to cover all this, to keep it moving. And I think they're talking about next summer.
Yeah, they want this
potentially
pretty quick.
for this to happen. So it's all moving pretty quickly, and we want to be as responsive as we can, but we wanted you to be informed.
Great. And Alderman Brown, to answer your question on Hillsborough, a contract was signed the day after y'all approved
Yes.
the CIP
Nice. Yes.
to move that forward.
Awesome. Thank you.
Alderman Caesar.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I live through this every day multiple times and appreciate the additional capacity, and not to look a gift horse in the mouth, but to identify that Mac Hatcher Lewisburg queue, and you talked about maybe giving more stacking, you can put 6 lanes turning left. And right now, during peak times, you can't get through the intersection because it's from Lewisburg to Royal Oak. So I worry, what are we going to do downstream to help make this functional? Because those 2 lanes are going to be great until it stacks all the way up.
Yeah.
And then you just got 2 lanes of people queuing. Maybe you don't queue further down Royal Oaks, but I don't know what kind of improvements we could look at that are low cost that we could do quickly at that Lewisburg intersection to keep people flowing. That's my only concern. Thank you, State, for hearing our concerns, and thank you for being willing to invest in this. I think that can't be said loudly enough. We need them to continue to help support our road improvement projects in this part of the city. Thank you.
Tell them the dominoes are going to fall, so give us some money for Lewisburg also. Item 12 is ordinance 2025-48 to establish all-way stop control at the intersection of Spencer Creek Road, Wheaton Hall Lane, and Clarice Park Lane.
We have looked at this intersection numerous times. It has some sight distance issues. The HOA has requested an all-way stop. We've tried trimming the trees. That hasn't worked, and so the next best option is to warrant a stop sign based on sight distance.
Item 13 is Resolution 2025-87, a resolution authorizing the execution of City of Franklin contract number 2025-0262 with Graco Constructors LLC for Echelon Lockwood Glen site infrastructure project completion grading contractor services.
So the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission recently called all the remaining sureties associated with Lockwood Glen subdivision. And so these sureties will allow us to go in there and finish some of the drainage improvements that the developer has not completed. We should be able to do it. This is just in their subdivision. There's also more improvements we have to do on Robinson Lake, but the sureties luckily are going to cover all the improvements that we have to do.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I will say I've spoken with the president of the HOA and the HOA's board members, and they're in full support of this.
Great. Item 14 is Paytonsville Road Improvement Project.
Just bear with me while I pull it up. Okay, so summary on this one is, if you'll remember back to Erickson Senior Living, they were required to do a traffic impact study. Ultimately, that study made recommendations on Paytonsville Road to do some improvements. And essentially, they were going to improve their side of the road. Reams Fleming was then going to come back and improve their side of the road. And then at the time that made sense, we would come in and improve Goose Creek as included in the CIP. So this is what Erickson Senior Living is required to do today. We were approached by Chapter 2 Investment, Erickson Senior Living, and Boyle, Reams Fleming, to, instead of piecemealing the project together over multiple contractors and multiple designers, was just to move forward with the overall design and then try to form some type of partnership to deliver the project. The partnership that we've been discussing with them at this point is essentially they would donate the necessary right-of-way that's needed. They would then get a recapture or reimbursement whenever development happens, so we wouldn't have to front the money for right-of-way acquisition. And then the developers would also be responsible for all the utility relocation, which is potentially a water line, gas line, and all the overhead electric. And there's another city water line and a Millcrofton water line. And so this is the option that they're approved to do today, that Erickson is required to do today at $5.8 million. Option 2. Hopefully it'll pull up. Is a little bit of an expanded scope, estimated to cost about $10.75 million. And then option 3 is really the full build, which is about $12.5 million is what we're estimating today. And I'm sorry, it's not pulling up so you can see it. Either way, it's in our best benefit to just get the entire design done all together instead of, again, piecemealing it over multiple contracts. And so we want to just get your approval to move forward with the full design, figure the partnership out with the developers, and bring that back when they're ready for construction. So this is the option 2, which doesn't necessarily touch Goose Creek Bypass. And then option 3 just includes the intersection.
And goes around the bend, kind of, if you will.
Yep,
right
goes
to
around
the
the
west.
bend, gets the signal installed, and sets it up for that future extension. So right now, we're just looking for your feedback and kind of guidance on to move forward with that overall design, and we'd bring that design contract back to you.
You do have some of this. This is funded. A portion of this is funded in your CIP, correct?
Correct.
So we have funds to pay for this design. There's just, it's sort of a preview of coming attractions. You're going to have a discussion around which option to pursue and how that works out with the other, partners in the area and how that might work. And you'll have some decisions to make. But having the design gives us that option.
Yes.
Alderman Baggett?
Related to that, my question was centered around what we have in our CIP for this, and when y'all come back, just kind of over and under.
How to give you, yeah.
I mean, that sounds great to do it all at once, but if that's an extra $5 million or $4 million when we weren't planning on it, that impacts other capital projects too. I mean, I understand it.
Yep.
Makes sense.
And some of it depends too on the partnership investments of the other developments in the area too. So yeah, absolutely, we'll give you that.
Yeah, $8 million is what we say in our memo was included in that financial model. And this is a way to get out in front of the development that's coming.
We're getting way out there.
Alderman Caesar?
Yeah, Erickson will be mad.
My only question is, there's been a substantial amount of development down there already, and there's more development we know that's coming. I don't know how much road impact dollars will come from those two projects or from the projects that were already there. How much of that is going to be able to fund this? Because it seems like this is an absolute result of growth and development in that area. And whether it's 5 million or 12 million, we know that development's going to happen in this area. I'd rather get the infrastructure there. The community has been screaming for us to precede development. And those of you guys that just got elected probably heard it a little bit when you were knocking doors. This would be something I'd really want to look at. It's very obvious that this is an area for growth for the city. I'd want to see how much development dollars in this quadrant for road impact or directly around here we have already collected that we could apply to this. I think that's an important piece. So we're not just dipping into the general fund. We're actually applying impact fees to improvements that are needed. Thank you.
Alderman Blanton, then I'll go to the vice mayor.
We're all looking for red. Thank you, Auntie.
There you go.
I think it's great. I think what sticks out to me is when you get to the right of the page and you think about getting towards Pratt Lane, and it's like, okay, we've got this great road, and then boom. I mean, granted, we fixed the bridge, but and the development's already been done there on that one side of the road. So, I mean, obviously it is what it is, and their road impact fees went somewhere, but as you get down to Pratt Lane, it's going to be just down to nothing again.
Yes, it will.
So,
And vice mayor, about to forget you. How could I forget you?
You can't. First, thanks for bringing this. It's great to see public-private partnership coming together and for them wanting to come to the table together at the same time. I think this is great. I think the piece that sticks out to me, and I hear what a couple of my peers have expressed, is
you've got the three options. I would not only want to see what the three options are engineered out, but then I would also like to be able to see each of those options regarding the impact on the traffic flow. We already know what the forecasted failure rates are going to be. So based on option 1, option 2, and option 3, really like to see which one of those is going to have the greatest benefit. And to Alderman Caesar's comment, that's exactly it. We have all sat here and said we want to put the infrastructure in place. We want to do it right the first time. And so we need you to provide us that engineering story so we can make the best decision possible.
Okay, can do.
I gotta make one.
Alderman Baggett, you're recognized.
Let me just make this one correction, is that what we heard on the campaign, during the campaign, was catch up on infrastructure and then build it before we grow. So when I bring up all of these items about we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars in the Southeast, yes, that is building before growth occurs, but I heard let's catch up too, and that's why when I make those comments, I'm obviously glad to do that, but I just wanted to make that caveat because that is what we heard, which is catch up, doing things like Royal Oaks and things like that, which we're doing, but just a little nuance.
Alderman Berger.
That reminds me of something, and I just want to say this. We don't necessarily go out and build roads. We do once in a blue moon, but development builds our roads. People say, let's put all the infrastructure there before we build. Well, that's not realistic. Building has to accomplish those roads, along with sometimes the partnership. But a long time ago, I think the mayor was elected in 2017. I just want to remind everybody, the city saw we had a TIF district over there by Nissan, and we knew that development was coming. We knew traffic was coming, and Mayor Shore at the time said we really need to go build Carruthers, and we need to get out ahead of that and build it. We took a big risk. We put a lot of money into that. We've been able to recoup most of that money through the development that happened over there. But we did. We got way out ahead of that one. But people have a tendency to forget that. But when it's the right thing to do and when we can do it, and then especially with the partnerships, I think we need to really, as you said, Alderman Potts, that we really need to capitalize on our partnerships.
Item 15, Resolution 2025-69, endorsing the Creekside Master Plan and supporting the preservation, interpretation, and connectivity of the Thomas Chute House surrounding property.
Thank you, Mayor. What's before you tonight is the resolution. It was taken before the joint conceptual on September the 25th, received a 9-0 approval. I'm happy to answer any questions. We've already presented the master plan to you, but happy to go over anything that you might have.
Item 16 is City of Franklin contract 2025-0139 with Vermont Systems for recreation software. Jamie?
Hi. So we are working to implement a new software program for the Parks and Recreation Department. The functions of it would be to help us manage program registrations, facility reservations. It will allow community members to register and book through online access. We have vetted the payment processing and reporting features through our finance and IT teams. And this really will help us automate and streamline various aspects of our daily operations, including our point of sale and our calendar management. I'm happy to answer any other questions you have.
Alderman Caesar.
This is more about parks in general. Facilities, do we have an occupancy rate or a utilization rate of our reserved facilities? And the reason I'm asking the question is not to put you on the spot, and you may not know and maybe bring it back later. I've seen in my business outside of here that online scheduling dramatically increases utilization of resources, right? Because people like to be able to go online and see when something's available and book it. I'd be really excited if we could see a utilization of X and then in 24 months after implementation of this, for us to look back and say, our community is using this more because we implemented this technology. So if we're not tracking it currently, I'd love to see us track it going forward so we could attribute increase or have more information in the future. So thank you.
Right, we do track it. I didn't bring the breakdown of that. I have just our total reservations. Last fiscal year, we did 307 facility reservations, but we do track it by facility, and I can get that information.
Can you include what those properties are?
Yeah, so we have, I have it on my
Eastern
notes.
Plain.
Yes, we have 8 pavilions in the park system, and then we also have Bicentennial Park, Harlansdale, and Eastern Flank. And then on top of that, we do have athletic fields and tennis courts.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Alderman Berger.
The financial impact, the one-time fee, the initial cost, I'm sorry. But then how often is that reoccurring, that 9,000?
So the 9,700, that's annual.
Is
That's an
annual?
annual fee.
Yeah, that's all been planned for in your budget. Okay. It's a pretty hefty reoccurring fee.
Okay, we'll go on to item 17 is City of Franklin Contract 2025-0493 with LDA Engineering for State Revolving Fund Loan Assistance for the design of the Pearl Park Clean Water Facility and assistance with development of State Revolving Fund funding for collection system piping replacement. Hey, Brian.
Hey, how are y'all tonight? Yes, this contract with LDA Engineering is to provide guidance and assistance. We got approved for an SRF loan for $17.5 million for the design of the south wastewater plant, and the fee's about $70,000, and $10,000 of the fee from LDA Engineering is also to apply for the HOBOS issues that we are dealing with currently. We used LDA Engineering when we did the wastewater plant on Claudia Yates Road. It's a tremendous help, tremendous help in getting our documents and stuff sent in correctly and getting our disbursements issued.
So this is essentially the same team worked with us on the $100 million loans that we secured for the expansion and upgrade of the existing water reclamation. So this would help us with next steps on the south plant and the HOBOS repair potential. We're not sure how much we might need to borrow, but we want to have the options available, and this helps us do that.
Okay, item 18 is to grant sewer availability for 1359 Caroline Circle. And the next one is deny sewer availability for 1104 Ridgeway Drive. And lastly, deny sewer availability for 2625 McLemore Road.
Yeah, the 1359 Caroline Circle, we had a request for connection to sewer. It's out in the Red Wing subdivision. There is the Goose Creek Interceptor is in behind that property. Sewer access was available. They had a failing septic, and we had no issues with agreeing to the availability and letting them connect.
And the other two we can't serve.
Right, the other two are simply pulling building permits and through the county process by where they have to get the denials. Just to do those improvements, there's no impact as far as our system goes or future expansions, anything like that. But there's one that's like 8,000 feet away from sewers. So we were okay with the denials.
Any other business? We had a good Veterans Day parade today, and we've got a big celebration tonight with swearing in of 4 re-elected aldermen. So if there's no other comment, we're going to adjourn this meeting, and we'll see you promptly at 7.